Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the MarSalus Report. Bill Salus, LA Marzulli. Billy, what's going on in your neck of the woods? What do you have to bring to the floor this week?
Well, last time we were together, we were talking about the concerns of Donald Trump withdrawing from the JCPOA. We were talking about the embassy opening on May 14th. Trump did that on May 8th. May 14th, the embassy opening. We were talking and preparing to do a report on the the Gaza border scenario where the Palestinians were being forced over to the borders there. But even since that has been happening, there's no shortage of headlines going on with respects to Mike Pompeo, for instance, our new Secretary of State on May 21st came out with his 12 demands on Iran, and he would then level unprecedented sanctions on them. We'll go over a few of those demands for our audience today, but also today it comes out that one of the Iranian leaders has come out and said, Ismail Qusayri says, we're going to punch Mike Pompeo in the mouth. So, these guys are, they're reacting just like we thought they would. They're not going to kowtow down to America's demands and become a civilized member of society and the United Nations. They're going to continue to rebel. And a lot of that has to do with something we've talked about in the past with their eschatology.
Absolutely.
The reason their Mahdi hasn't come yet is because perhaps they haven't created enough apocalyptic condition in the Middle East. So a lot to talk about today, LA.
Yeah, and just piggyback on the Iranian thing, it's from the sources that I've been getting, and these are, sources that are not mainstream media. The people have really had it with the mullahs, apparently, in Iran. They can't do anything about it yet, but there's an uprising that's slowly simmering. And of course, what the United States is always engaged in is regime change. It does it over and over and over again. Because the ends justify the means, according to the deep state. It's all about the economy and keeping things going. So the mullahs have this, like you said, an apocalyptic worldview. It's in their ideology. It's embedded in the very fabric of their religion, in the Shia branch of Islam. They are waiting for the Mahdi to come. And in order for the Mahdi to come, we've talked about this before, but people tune in for the first time. In order for the Mahdi to appear, there must be chaos in the world. There has to be chaos. So the mullahs who have this apocalyptic ideological bent are embracing it, are awaiting it, and they want to create chaos. So, look, Iran has an air force. We know that, but it's no match for Israel's air force. Hezbollah has no air force, so they're out of the game. The 80,000 troops in Iran, or in Syria, the only air backing they would have would be the Russians if the Russians entered the fray. And of course, Hamas has no air force. So for Iran to really engage Israel, and they just got their butt kicked a couple of weeks ago when Israel did a strike north of Damascus and wiped out several intel areas and strategic, let's put it this way, targets that were strategic to Israel's interest. Iran knows that if it launches some kind of a war without air support, good luck with that. I mean, we saw that at the end of World War II when Germany's Luftwaffe had all been just blasted out of the sky. So the Allies flew over Germany and dropped as many bombs as they wanted to with little or no resistance. So without air power, Iran can't go up against Israel. So even though a lot of saber rattling has been going on, Iran has an air force, but it's certainly no match for Israel. So, I mean, that's my take on what's going on with Iran. But tell us about what's happening with the sanctions, and that's going to put a squeeze on the Iranian people once again.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. I also I agree with you, and in the process of them trying to create the apocalyptic condition that would hasten the coming of their Mahdi, they are dealing with the contention internally with all the youth. About 80% of the Iranians are under 35 years old, so they were born after the takeover in 1979. So you're right, there's sort of a photo finish. Can they get their Mahdi coming, which we know won't happen, before there's an uprising within their own country? So that, it also puts pressure on them to go ahead and start that war that they're talking about doing over in the Middle East with Israel, to wipe Israel off the map. In response to Pompeo's demands and the sanctions, we'll just go over a couple of those in just a minute. We're already, like we said, one of the commanders is saying we're going to punch Pompeo in the mouth. We have another one, a senior military commander named Mohammed Meghari, just came out basically and said our military is more prepared than ever for war with Israel. And then also DEPCA reports today that Syrian Hezbollah buildup is moving towards the Jordanian border. That's concerning Israel and the U.S. Because we put them right in line with attacking U.S. troops in northern Jordan and a move on Quintera, the city over there by the Golan. So their response is not civil. Their response is, hey, this is provoking us to go to war. Now, Pompeo came out with his 12 demands and said if they weren't met, they would level unprecedented sanctions never seen before in world history, and that they would choke off Iran's economy like never before. This will also put a real squeeze and pinch on our European allies who are scrambling around trying to figure out what to do and how to respond and what side of the fence to be on. Iran's leader who put the nuclear deal together with John Kerry, Zarif, has flown over to China to talk to them because China's got huge interest in Iran right now with respects to the nuclear reactors they want to build. Russia also is involved with billions of dollars of contracts with nuclear reactors over there. Russia and China are part of the P5+1, but the Europeans are scrambling around, France, Germany, and Britain, the other members of the P5+1, trying to figure out what are we on Iran's side, are we on America's side, how are these sanctions going to stop us? They're talking about legislating laws where their sanctions can't affect the European societies and countries over there, which in my estimation will not work. Poland came out just recently and said we want to be the liaison between the European Union and America to support what Pompeo said. And what Pompeo said is just several demands. First, Iran must allow full access of the IAEA on inspections. They must stop uranium enrichment. They must allow unqualified access to these sites. They must end its proliferation of ballistic missiles. They must release all U.S. citizens held captive in prison. End support for the Middle East terrorist groups. End its military support for the Houthi militia and have them stop firing missiles into Saudi Arabia. Withdraw all forces throughout all of Syria. Now, that is not happening, and in fact, they're moving toward the border of Jordan, like I just read in that headline. So, I think what's happening right now, I was asked recently on a program, do I think Obama had created irreparable damage
Absolutely.
during his eight years? And I said, I think at this point, Trump has left to a point where the only out he has is to be the new sheriff in town, and that's probably going to lead to the war, and that's where you get your epic biblical prophetic.
Well, and this is the problem. I mean, people, never Trumpers, Trump, can't do anything right. Excuse me. No one looks at what Obama did. Obama created the mess that we have in the Middle East. The Obama administration did nothing with the Arab Spring. The Obama administration essentially created the vacuum that ISIS filled. The Obama administration led from behind, completely from behind, and never did anything in regard to Iran's nuclear power. And as Benjamin Netanyahu stood up several weeks ago, they have never stopped enriching uranium. The whole thing is a farce. It's just an absolute joke on an international level. And the fact that we spent billions of taxpayer monies to somehow placate the Iranians on this uranium deal is such absolute nonsense. So, look, the bottom line is, Trump's no dummy, and it's time for America first. And this is what it hails back to. And our ally in the region is not Iran. Our ally is Israel. But I want to skip over, last week with the May 14th celebration, and it pretty much went without incident, at least in and around Jerusalem. Anything can happen, though. But meanwhile, in Gaza, Hamas, which controls Gaza, and Hamas is a terrorist organization, and right in their charter, it says basically the destruction of Israel. I mean, there is no two-state solution. They don't want a two-state solution. They want every Jew killed and displaced out of Israel, so they can turn what the Israelis have done, which is incredible, into the dump that they turned Gaza in. So it's amazing when the so-called Palestinians, which is a misnomer, went into the Gaza Strip, they inherited farms, greenhouses, infrastructure, all for Israel, and they just destroyed them because they were Jewish, because they were Israeli. So now Gaza is like one of the worst places to live. They dump their raw sewage into the ocean. They're ruled by Hamas, which of course is a terrorist organization. And so on May 14th, 40,000 Palestinians, and remember, they're not just going, hey, let's go to the border and get killed. They're being pushed there by Hamas because of the ideological bent that Hamas has, because they are a terrorist organization, and people are basically threatened in some ways to get up to the border, 40,000 people against 2,000 IDF troops. And what the media isn't saying is that Hamas used kites with incendiary devices attached to them. So they would fly the kites over the Israeli border. These incendiary devices would land in a field, explode, and start a fire. If the incendiary device explodes on the ground near a group of soldiers, then they're burned alive. That's what's going on. And in the midst of the 40,000 people, there were terrorist cells embedded within those 40,000 people who were trying to sneak over the border. These are terrorists that were armed with automatic weapons, rocket-propelled grenades, the whole 9 yards. And so, amazing how Newsweek originally says, oh, Israel kills 60 Palestinians, yada, yada, yada. Whoop, and then there was a retraction on page, 82 or whatever, that what they found was 50 of the 60 that were killed were actually Hamas terrorists armed with automatic weapons. Hello. So, that's what's really going on. And we can see that the vitriol between the Muslim world and Israel, it's a supernatural problem. I've said this before, I'll say it again, that the events that happened millennia ago set up two different supernatural viewpoints. One, Moses, we get the Torah and our Bible, the Christian Bible stems from that. Messiah stems from that, comes out of a line of Abraham. But the Muslims look at the Quran and Muhammad as the last real revelation. So there's a disparity between the two mindsets, between the two worldviews, and both can't be right. So that's what we're looking at. Two sets of supernatural events, millennia apart, have colored the body politic, and now it's spilling over into all the events that we see. People that are born, let's say, in Gaza are grown up with this hatred of the Israelis, of the Jews. There's a clip on YouTube. They may have taken it down. It's funny how I'm censored, how guaranteed the MarSalus report, which is why we don't even monetize it anymore. Instantly, as we post it, unsuitable for most advertisers, LA and Bill, so you're out of luck. But the bottom line is they show this picture of a little 2 or 3 year old girl holding a butcher knife, and she's got a big smile on her face, and she goes, "I want to stab a Jew." What are we supposed to do with stuff like this? It's absolutely unbelievable. So, Billy, what's next?
Well, yeah, I just want to make a couple comments on that as well. Very good take on that Gaza thing, the real true story behind it. They were actually telling children and women to go up to the front lines,
right,
for the PR purposes, right, and that sort of thing. And again, the IDF came out and said these are unprecedented protests. Remember, I just said unprecedented sanctions by Pompeo. The term unprecedented protests, because there's been plenty of protests for the borders of Israel. But we're talking about the top number one type unprecedented events are starting to happen, which gets our attention, LA and mine and a lot of our colleagues, on the focus that something biblical is about to happen, that we're going to lead into wars. Now, the same thing what happened was, at the day of May 14th, Iran promised a $100,000 bounty on anybody who would blow up the U.S. embassy. The same token, Turkey recalled their ambassador from Israel in the U.S. and said that this was a Gaza genocide attempt that's going on. LA, I think you hit on it when you talked about the ancient hatred that's been enveloped in the religion of Islam over there. And I want to spend a moment about this, because what's going to happen is you're going to Israel real soon with a tour. And when you're there, or maybe shortly when you get back, there's a possibility that Donald Trump is going to forward his Middle East peace plan. Everybody's suspenseful, wondering what's he going to put in the plan. There's a few little leaks that have come here and there. But tell us about the Israel thing for a minute, and then also I want to tell you what God actually has a peace plan that he put together 2,500 years ago with Jeremiah in Jeremiah chapter 12. But how's that Israel tour shaping up for you guys?
Well, we've got 22 people that have signed up, so there'll be 30 people on the tour. Armando Gonzalez has been over there 4 or 5 times. He's our archaeologist. He's also a pastor, and so he'll be sort of like speaking at several places. I'll be speaking at several stops on the tour, specifically Nimrod's Castle. If we can get up to Gilgal Raphaim there, and of course the huge megalithic stones underneath the Temple Mount, which I believe were put there pre-flood. But we can argue about that. But we're going to see the sites. It'd be great to see the people. Bob Ulrich of Prophecy Watchers, of course, and his lovely wife Chrissy will be joining us, and so it's just going to be a great time. And, Bill, it's my first time over there, Peggy and I's first time over there, and it's hard to believe that just in a few days we'll be actually waking up in Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm going to send an email over to Chris Mitchell, the CBN Jerusalem news correspondent over there, and see if you guys can't connect. I know both your schedules will be pretty busy, but maybe he'll get you in the studio there and you can share some of things with CBN as well. the bottom line is this Middle East peace plan. The Lord knew in Jeremiah chapter 12 that when the Jews came back into the land that had been desolate for so many years, that the ancient Arab hatred would not go away, that it would be embellished in the religion of Islam, and he prepared a peace plan to deal with it, a very copacetic, wonderful, compassionate plan. I'm going to read it to you in Jeremiah chapter 12, verses 14 through 17. Remember, the Lord knows the end from the beginning. So he was not caught off guard by the problems we see in the Middle East. He knew they would come, and here's how he planned to deal with that. It says, "Thus says the Lord, against all my evil neighbors." He's talking about those neighbors that share common borders with Israel, "who touch the inheritance which I have caused my people Israel to inherit. That is the land of Israel. Behold, I will pluck them out," forceful language, "I will pluck them out of their land," those Arabs, out of the homeland of Israel. "And I will pluck out the house of Judah from among them." He would pull the Jews out of the Arab lands. Then he says, after that, I pluck them out, because it's a forceful issue. They're not all going to go voluntarily, correct? After I pluck them out, that I will return and have compassion on them and bring them back, everyone, Arab and Jew, to his heritage, and everyone to his land. And Ellie, we saw this transpiring after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed. We saw Egypt get a statehood. I think that was 1922. Iraq and Saudi Arabia, I think it was around 1935. Jordan and Syria, 1946. Israel, 1948. We saw God do this, the greatest land for peace deal ever, putting the Arabs back in their states and their inheritances, and the Jews in their inheritance. And he says this in verse 16 of Jeremiah 12. "And it shall be, if the Arabs learn carefully the ways of my people, the Jews, to swear by my name, the God of the Bible, as the Lord lives, as they taught my people, the Jews, to swear by Baal, the false Arab god, then they shall be established in the midst of my people." What he's saying there is so powerful. He's saying, at the time Jeremiah wrote this, the Jews were sacrificing their children to Baal, the false god, with great zeal. God is saying, if you'll swear by my name, the God of the Bible, I will have compassion on all of you. You will be established in the midst of my people. But here's the caveat that the world needs to know, and Trump needs to know. Verse 17, "But if they do not obey, if those Arabs, those evil neighbors do not obey, I will utterly pluck up and destroy that nation, says the Lord." That was God's peace plan. It was compassionate. He would pluck them out. He would give them their homelands. They just needed to swear by him. They don't. They swear by Allah. They're trying to wipe Israel off the map. They're in Psalm 83. They're in Isaiah 17. They're in Ezekiel 38 and all other types of prophecies. So, LA, I think right now, with all these unprecedented events happening right now, we need to be watching for the prophecies to start to find fulfillment.
We certainly do. And I just want to add something to this. And you and I have talked about this years ago. My take on Jordan and the king of Jordan, Abdullah II. The king of Jordan is the person who actually controls the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The Waqf, W-A-Q-F, the Waqf answers to the king of Jordan. So it's a very interesting dynamic that we have over there. He's also a Hashemite king. The Hashemite kings are the direct descendants of Muhammad. So King Abdullah holds great sway in the Muslim world. What's interesting is after World War I, the Hashemite kings were given rule, get this now, over Syria. The Hashemite kings ruled in Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. And the Ba'ath Party came in and deposed them, and they all fled to Jordan, where they remained. When the U.S. troops came in and deposed Saddam Hussein, and the Constitution was being sort of lifted up, it was very interesting. The king of Jordan actually kind of ran up the flagpole to see how it would react. Let's set up a constitutional monarchy in Iraq, which of course, King Abdullah being the king. I'm not making this up. That was actually bandied about shortly after Saddam was deposed. So could it be, and this is incredible when you really think about it, that there's sort of a quid pro quo going on? Because even when you go back 40 years ago, the Jordanians were saying that Jordan is Palestine. I mean, the Palestinians already have their homeland, and it's Jordan. So if that were to happen, let's just run with one. This is obviously great speculation, but who knows? So the quid pro quo is the king of Jordan steps down from Jordan and sets up his Hashemite kingdom in Iraq. And the reason why he would do this is the money, the oil, because Jordan has no oil, but Iraq's got a lot of oil. So all of a sudden he goes from sort of a B player, even though he's sort of an A player on the Middle Eastern stage, but a B player on the world stage. He's in Iraq. He's got all those oil reserves. Just saying. I mean, it's certainly and he would be heralded as one of the greatest peacemakers of our time, because he actually resolves the Palestinian-Israeli issue by giving Jordan over to the Palestinians. Just saying. I mean, that's certainly a scenario, more than likely a very unlikely one. Bill, we're almost out of time. Why don't you take us home?
Well, okay, and the thing that would happen, he'd have to leave before Jeremiah 49 verses 2 happens, because it says in a prophecy that has not been fulfilled yet, dealing with Amman, Jordan, the capital of Jordan, it says, "Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that I will cause to be heard an alarm of war in Rabbah of the Ammonites." That's where his palaces are.
Exactly.
He says, "It shall be a desolate mound." It sounds much like the destruction of Damascus in Isaiah 17.
Yep.
"And her villages shall be burned with fire. Then Israel shall take possession of his inheritance, says the Lord." So the Israeli Defense Forces take out Amman, Jordan in that prophecy. And it's also echoed in Zephaniah 2, verses 8 through 9, which our audience can read that. We do have to watch Jordan. That whole prophecy in Jeremiah 49, verses 1 through 6 is very interesting. It talks about fear coming in on all sides around Jordan, that they'd be cast out as exiles headlong, and that this war would take place and Israel would take over its inheritance, which Amman, Jordan, and all of Jordan is part of the promised land given to Abraham in Genesis 15:18, from the river of Egypt, the Nile, to the river Euphrates, which courses through Iraq and Syria. But, we don't know some of these things. We've got to watch this carefully. You're right. Palestine was supposed to be in the Balfour Declaration when it was called Transjordan. That was supposed to be the Arab area over there.
That's right.
Israel was supposed to get all of that.
That's right.
England did not exercise that when they had full authority. So, of course, now the sun always sets on the British Empire, which at that time, he's pro-Israel. He's acknowledging Jerusalem as the embassy, the capital of Israel, and we moved our embassy there. I'm very proud of that moment in history.
That's all the time we have for today. Bill, thanks so much for coming on the record on the MarSalus Report. This is an ongoing feature that we'll be doing, and we'll be back again soon with another tasty helping of the MarSalus Report. Thanks for watching.
My Jingos, it's amazingly fresh and clean out here in beautiful New Zealand. G'day America, I'm Tarby, and I want to tell you about my new ultimate stain and odour remover, Jingos. My Jingos gunk gobblers will tackle stubborn organic stains and eliminate nasty stinking odours at the same time. Jingos effectively removes those little accidents like wine, coffee, dirt, blood, grass, even peat stains, and odours like fish, garlic, even skunk. Jingos is environmentally friendly, safe for use on fabrics, carpet, upholstery, and it works great as a laundry pre-soak on the worst pet or people accidents. Come on America, what are you waiting for? Just go online and order your Jingos for $12.95 and get a 4-ounce travel pack free. Crikey, pay $19.95 and I'll double your order. That's 2 large Jingos and 2 travel packs for just $19.95. Blasted seagulls, where's my Jingos?